Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
This is probably the weirdest interview question I've ever received. I had an interviewer pull out a metal pipe, probably, 18 inches, 2 feet long, and say to me, "What would you do if somebody pulled this out and came at you?" Now, to give some context to it, I was in law school. I was interviewing for just a part-time position with the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. They have a program called, or had a program, I assume it's still in play, a lot of value to it, called the Night Prosecutor Program. And what it would do is it would bring in generally nonviolent offenders, or nonviolent, not offenders, but people who had disputes in the community, neighborhood disputes, domestic disputes, things like that. And so the question had total relevance because this was prior to the day of, I'm sure there were metal detectors, but there weren't metal detectors on the building. And it was entirely plausible that somebody could come in and have a metal bar on them. Sure, the person asked the question, Scott Dewhurst, who is ultimately I got a position there, my boss. He wasn't just making it up that these things do happen. And what are you going to do? And I think my answer was as well, I would probably, try to, calm the situation or get myself and the other party to safety. So entirely possible, because you would have, it would be heated situations, and your job as a mediator is to try and come to a resolution that both parties are happy with. And sometimes as you all well know, you can't please everybody. So that was really kind of an odd question. But the general questions that are going out there in interviews, what's your biggest weakness? What a trap question that is. And you hear people talking about it all the time, that they will get that sort of a question. What's your biggest weakness? And I say it's a trap question because what are you going to do? I mean, you need to be honest, right? You're supposed to be honest. You should always be honest. But you don't want to, don't want to be so honest that you just totally crush your opportunity. What's your biggest weakness? Well, I day drink. That's my biggest weakness. Well, obviously that's going to be a deal killer. So you don't want to go with that. Hopefully that's not the issue. But we all have weaknesses, and you need to kind of come up with a weakness that's sort of bad, but not horribly bad. So you always kind of struggle with that. And for me, I've only really had one full-time job, and only had that question asked of me once. And I can't really remember what my answer to it was. I'm trying to get a job, and I'm just, I'm trying to get a job, and I want to put my best foot forward. And there's a lot going on. That's not the only question you're getting, right? I mean, I was interviewing for a tax consulting position, and there were a lot of other questions that were more technical in nature. But if I had to answer that question now, my question would probably be one of two things. Knowing a little more about myself, my first answer would probably be, I'm not real good with deadlines. I'm just not. I mean, and I learned this about myself when I was in law school. Law school as an undergrad. High school, you have assignments in that, but it's usually, hey, tomorrow do this or whatever. You didn't have these long-term assignments. But when I was in college, Beloit College, sophomore year, had an economics class, and you had to write a 40-page paper. That's a monster paper. It had to be typewritten. Thank you, Peg Dorscheid Buckley, who typed it up for me. I would still be clanking away trying to type that baby up. But this was a project, and you had like 8 weeks. I turned it in 2 weeks before it was due. because I didn't want to mess around with a deadline. Deadlines just stress me out. And so it's a weakness for me to have deadlines. And what I do to compensate, as I did in college, is I try to plan ahead, try to get well ahead of whatever deadlines are out there. And so I've kind of turned a weakness, hopefully, into a strength. But occasionally deadlines hit, and it's just the stress gets to me. Not in a horrible way. I just don't like it. That's all. But the second thing I would say, which really kind of plays into this particular episode, is patience. I'm not a patient person. I'm just not. Um, I get it. I can't go to the gym one day and expect to have six-pack abs the next or ever at this point. Um, but I'm impatient. I want to do things and I want a quick result with respect to what's happening with whatever it is. And it's kind of interesting because one of the most important components of good networking is patience, if you really stop and think about it. In fact, all of networking is an exercise in patience. You do something, do something for somebody else, and you aren't supposed to expect that something comes back from them. It's not a transaction. And sometimes what you do comes back immediately. Sometimes it takes a little while. Sometimes it might take years. Sometimes it might seem like it never comes back to you, but in a way it does, in kind of a roundabout way. And so you need to be patient with respect to networking. Um, what I find has been helpful for me, and I thought about this the other day when I was interviewing Jamie Ellithorpe, um, that what's helped me be patient is having lots of things going on. Let me give you an example. If you're networking and you go out there and you do one thing for somebody, you do the one thing, and you're kind of hopeful and waiting that that's going to come back to you somehow, some way, it's going to drive you nuts because it's that one thing that's out there. Now, if you have two things that you've done, there, you still might be waiting, but then there are kind of two things hanging out there. If you have 20 things or more than your mind can really keep track of, you stop being impatient because you just move on to the next thing. So you might do something for somebody, make an introduction, give somebody a referral, and let's say you do, there's 10 introductions and 10 referrals that you've given and encouragement. You've just done a lot of things. You're just on to doing the next thing, and you're not really worried about what's coming to you. And things ultimately come back to you, but it always works out. It does. You just have to trust it. It's an exercise in patience, and it's an exercise in faith. I was reading a email that came email newsletter that came from Tim Scherr. He's a hypnotist, psychologist, but he was talking about impatience, and his tips for impatience are, pause and breathe. So if all of a sudden you find yourself being impatient, take a long breath in and then breathe out. Um, as he says, it sounds basic, but it works. You stop and realize that, what, there's nothing I can do. I introduced two people. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. Hey, where is mine? Being impatient, being anxious in that moment's not going to change anything. So you might as well just breathe and relax. The second thing he talks about is reframing the moment. Instead of focusing on what's going wrong, why am I not getting something? Why is my network not working? Maybe reframe it into, what's this moment teaching me? Where's the opportunity in this? Maybe the opportunity is just following up with somebody and say, hey, I just wanted to follow up and see how the introduction between you two went. Um, And it might be they haven't connected yet, or they did, and oh, we're so sorry, Frank. We're so sorry. It was great. This has been awesome. I figured they were going to tell you, so I didn't, and vice versa. But it's awesome. Thank you very much. Right? Um, we're thinking of you. We've got some stuff. We want to involve you on the stuff we're doing. And so you and kind of reframing the moment and just saying, okay, maybe there's something I can do. Maybe there's an opportunity here for me. And then the third thing he talks about is just find the humor in it. Just kind of laugh it off. I look at it when I introduce people or when I give a referral. I'm really not depleted, maybe other than a little bit of time. And I just have to trust that things will come back to me somehow, some way. And you don't know when, you don't know where, but that's the whole notion of networking. So, really the lesson in today's message is get out there and network and do things for other people and just trust, have faith that it's going to work out for you. Try to be patient. It's not always easy. I'm not a patient person. For me, the best way to kind of work through it is just have lots going on and kind of forget about the whole notion that you introduced two people or that you gave a referral. And your job is not to follow up on that and pine away for something to come back on any particular thing that you do. Your job is just to look forward and look for the next thing that you can do and just continue to do that time and time again. And eventually, it will work out for you. Trust me. Just be patient. Have faith in the process.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.